Welcome to the Station Wagon. I'm the older brother, Marc.
And I'm little sister Julie. This is the podcast where my brother and I give up something we take for granted and tell you how it goes.
Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Let's do podcasting.
Let's do podcasting. Hi, Julie.
Hey, Marc, what are we doing today?
Well, today, Julie, we are going to be giving up touching.
Oh, thank goodness.
I know, right? It's such a hassle.
People are like sticky and germy and stuff, and sometimes there's like jelly on them. It's horrible.
Well, you're talking about your own kids, right?
No, my children are totally jelly-free.
They're jelly-free.
Jelly-free.
So whenever I love my children, like to the moon and back, of course, but every time I let them borrow my phone or I try to use one of the devices that they've had for 5 seconds, it comes back covered in some kind of residue.
I just got a new laptop and it has a touch screen, but I have not revealed this fact to anyone in the family. As far as they are concerned, if they touch it with their finger, it will explode.
Oh, right, exactly. So, I mean, this is all about touching, not touching devices, but touching other people, right?
Humans and dogs.
Yeah, we'll get more into what we're going to do specifically. But first, would you like a quiz?
Yes, please. Because last time, I dreamt that I got 3 out of 3. But last time I got 2 out of 3.
That's right. Last time you did get 2 out of 3, even though I was hoping that you would lose.
Right. Thank you. That's sweet.
Okay. In the Snoqualmie Elementary School, what kind of touching are students allowed to do in the hallways? A, fist bumps, high fives, pat on the shoulder or upper back, or nothing. Keep your hands and feet to yourself.
I'll go with A and B.
Wrong. It's nothing. Keep your hands and feet to yourself. It's actually in the student code of conduct.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2. So please just record that you missed that one.
All right.
All right. Number 2. What type of touching are all of these? Ready?
Yeah.
So I'm going to list off 3 things and you have to tell me what type of touching they are.
Bad touch.
Keep back, queen's fingertips, and the dominator.
Basketball moves?
No. And how are basketball moves touching another person?
It's a way that it's not a foul. Like you're allowed on the basketball court to use the queen's touch.
That's really good. That's good. No, that's wrong.
It's a sports thing.
Do you want? I'll give you another. I'll give you another choice. Go ahead, or another try. Go ahead.
Bocce.
What? Bocce ball? No,
yeah.
You don't touch other people when you play bocce.
Well, you're doing it wrong.
No, that's not true.
Okay, what is it? I give up.
Handshakes. There are all types of handshakes. Right.
Oh, cool.
So the queen's fingertips are, you can imagine that's when a person puts just their fingertips into your hand to shake.
Okay, yeah.
The dominator is when you shake a person's hand, but you are turning your hand so your hand is on top of their hand. Yeah, I like that one. Okay. Number 3. What are the appropriate touches at work? Ready? Fist bumps, high fives, handshakes, pat on the shoulder or upper back, or nothing unless you know your audience.
I'll say handshake.
Wrong. Nothing unless you know your audience. Any touching, and this is a quote from a reference that I have in the references.
Okay.
That I like to call show notes. Any touching, even a pat on the back before you know someone is too personal for strangers. So make sure that you really know your coworkers before engaging in any physical contact, even a high five.
Okay, so I agree with all that except for the handshake. I just think in U.S. culture, at least, a handshake, if you don't shake someone's hand, can be inappropriate on first meeting.
Yeah, I agree. So, if somebody is sticking out their hand to shake your hand, I guess there's things that you could do to not shake their hand if you don't want to. Like somebody was telling me that they put out their hand to shake someone's hand and the person gave them their elbow. And said, "Bow me." Julie, you did really terrible. That was the worst that you've done in a very long time. I'm sure that our dear listeners have done much better than you. So way to, make everyone else feel really good about themselves.
Well, I still disagree with that last one, but I think we'll come back to it later.
Can we go on to history now?
Yes, it's history.
All right. Let me see if I can
keep it moving, dude.
Let me see if I can underwhelm you with history.
Okay.
3000 BCE. This was the first written reference to kissing that has been found in some Sumerian poetry. And
Weird.
may I read it to you? It's very short.
Yeah.
Okay. My lips are too small, they know not to kiss. My precious sweet lying by my heart, one by one, tongue making, one by one. When my sweet precious, my heart, had lain down to each of them in turn, kissing with the tongue, each in turn. So it's actually, I think it was not only the first reference to kissing, but French kissing. I guess it should be called Sumerian kissing. I'm going to change that. I think that's going to be a thing.
I guess we could have a whole episode about kissing. Ugh.
Yeah, I know. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
It's just icky. It's talking with you. All right, 1907.
I'm your yucky sister.
Yeah. 1907, Gustav Klimt painted The Kiss. Do you know that
That's
one?
a beautiful... Hey, I've been to college.
I know,
been in
right?
a dorm room.
Right, exactly what I was going to say. So I think I had that in my dorm room.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm 100% sure that I had that one. It is such a thing. It's a rite of passage for dorm rats to have that in their dorm room.
Definitely.
Yep. 1965, Temple Grandin developed the hug machine.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what do you know about Temple Grandin?
Okay, well, she's a very famous author who's openly spoken about her lifetime of having autism, or probably autism spectrum disorder. Right. And I've read her autobiography. It's pretty fascinating. And one thing that she discovered was that just being hugged and touched in like away from other humans was stressful for her, but that sensation of being wrapped up or swaddled was very comforting. And she thought that maybe this would help livestock as well. So she developed a machine that would essentially hug cows to help them be slaughtered or branded or any kind of thing, or vaccinated or anything, just to help them in that moment. And I think it's the same kind of concept behind the thunder shirts that we put on dogs during thunderstorms.
Yeah, I bet you're right. And so in our show notes, there's a picture of the hug machine that was developed for people's usage.
Oh, cool.
And it's interesting. It looks like, if you can imagine, boards coming up from the ground at a V angle. Sorry, I bumped my mic. At a V angle, and you kind of slot your body in there. And then the apparatus kind of just squishes you gently.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, pretty interesting deal. 2004, I learned how to do some serious cuddles because I had my first daughter.
Aww.
And you can see a picture of me in the show notes giving my daughter, who's now 12 years old, probably one of her first cuddles on my chest sleeping. It's so sweet. Yeah, I mean, but there's really nothing as far as, and I'm sorry to everybody out there.
I hope you didn't squeeze her too tight.
No, I didn't.
She's just a baby. Don't squeeze babies.
No, but I did really like doing this thing with them at the breakfast table where I would lick an Oreo, not an Oreo, a Cheerio and stick it on their head. Stick it on her head, like kind of like Vivian's stars from The Young Ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really cool.
I'm glad that your daughters were comedy props.
Totally. And they just thought had no idea because they didn't know what was going on. 2012, the Hugbot was invented, and it's a huge teddy bear with a somewhat goofy grin that can wrap its arms around you.
Was this invented in Japan?
You know, I think it was. Yes, it was definitely invented in Japan. Yes, definitely. 2014, the movie Big Hero 6 came out.
Oh, yeah.
And Baymax's character has the famous line. Do you know?
Well, my favorite line of his was, "Furry baby."
What was that in reference to?
When he was a little bit drunkish from not having enough air and he saw the kitty cat.
He said over and over again, "Would you like a hug?"
Aww.
Right. So I don't know if you can see the thing here, but the theme with my history, theme that I'm talking about hugs, that's the form of touching in the hugs.
Yeah. And I'll be talking about that a lot in the science section, but we'll have to get back to that because I'm guessing most of the touches we do outside of our family are not hugs, or at least they are.
Yeah. 2014, the Free Hugs Project with Ken Nowotaki started up. Do you know anything about that?
Is he the guy who would just stand in public places with signs that said free hugs and have someone videotape it and put it on YouTube?
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
He's the CEO of Superhero Events and the director of the Hollywood Half Marathon. And yes, that's how And then he started doing this free hugs thing in places where there was a lot of tension. Yeah, so it was really cool. And here's just a real short quote from him. While viewing the devastation of the 2013 bombing of the Boston Marathon, I was determined to be a participant in the next race. He failed to qualify by 23 seconds, so I decided to attend the event in a different way. I provided free hugs to runners as encouragement along the route.
Oh, cool.
The simple act made national news headlines and lifted runners' spirits. Hugs produced smiles and gave runners an extra boost as they ran. But wouldn't it also slow them down?
Well, I mean, maybe. But when you're thinking about like a 4-hour plus marathon and you're not one of the top 25 competitors, I think that extra 15 seconds won't be a big deal.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. 2015, a product called Huggable was developed by MIT. And basically what it is a moving, blinking, talking toy bear that children can interact with in the hospital.
Oh,
and it's very
cool.
huggable and cute and stuff. And there's a link to a video about it in our show notes. It's super sweet.
So it's like a fur mother.
Right. It's almost like a wireframe monkey.
Yeah.
From that study. And then the last thing that I want to talk about, certainly the most important, is that in 2016, we got Pebbles, the puppy. And this is actually relevant this time.
Oh, really?
Yes, because she cuddles with our kids and each of us in the way that each person needs or wants.
Aww.
Which is really cool. And I didn't expect that when we got a dog, that she would be that adaptable, but she totally is. So I've got in the show notes a couple pictures of the kids with cuddling in their own way with Pebbles. And it's really funny. My 12-year-old, who's just a total bookworm and loves reading, is doing her thing reading, and Pebbles is off to the side cuddling. And my 8-year-old, who's much more hands-on, holding her like a doll almost. So yeah, so it's really, really sweet.
That's
so
sweet.
That is history of hugging throughout the ages. And I'm guessing that there's probably no other discussion that can be had about hugging or touching, Julie. So,
probably not. So let's move on.
Do you want to, so do you want to talk about science, even though there's probably not really much to talk about there?
There's lots, so I did limit it. But quick question for you. Have you ever had a friend who's just a total hugger? Like needs to hug all the time. Can you think of someone in mind who's like that?
Let me think. No, but I can think of, I don't have any friends that are total huggers like that, but I do know that at work, at all of my jobs, there have always been those people who like to hug for things at work. Oh, you finished a project, hug. Oh, you did such and such, a hug, or, oh, you're feeling bad and you're crying. Oh, let me give you a hug.
So those
Which
people...
actually, I guess that one kind of makes sense. But yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, so those people that you've known, are they male or female?
They're female.
Always?
Let me think. Yes.
How acceptable, like on a scale of 1 to 10, do you find those behaviors? Or did you find them in the moment? Okay,
so from the corporate perspective, I see it as being just fine as long as, like we talked about earlier, the people who are receiving the hug are okay with it. But from my own personal perspective, I don't like it. I don't like that kind of crossing the line of personal space at work.
Now imagine they're men.
I've never...
From both corporate and yourself.
Right. So for me as a man also, because I'm not going to try to put myself into a woman's shoes, you can attempt to do that. If
they're big enough.
Right.
You have huge feet. I'm just saying you have to go to a special store.
I sense that it would create more weirdness than if a woman came up and tried to hug me. Like if a man tried to come up and hug me, it would create more weirdness for me. But I have been hugged by men, and I have hugged other men at the office in times of need. So I don't, it's not like I have a 100% prohibition on it or anything. It just doesn't happen. I just can't, I can count the times like on one hand when that's happened, where with women and hugging, I can't count them. They're too innumerable.
Okay, well, a couple of themes I'm going to come back to at the end of this is, one, gender, because that really plays into this a lot. But two is just power differential, which in the past, gender and power differential have been pretty correlated, right?
Right.
Now that women are more oftentimes in leadership positions, that power differential is a little different. And so sometimes women have been able to adopt behavior like hugging and touching that probably aren't as appropriate as we move into leadership positions. So, okay, baby.
Oh, so that's interesting. So you're saying that women who are moving into leadership positions are taking some of the practices that they have of hugging and touching at lower level positions and the culture is not approving of that in their leadership roles.
Yeah, and I think it's something women need to be really mindful of because we're raised with the idea of, oh, okay, you can go ahead and touch. You're a woman. Whereas for men, I think they're more often trained not to touch.
Shouldn't women be allowed to like change the culture that they're going into? I mean, if you're going to get more women in leadership roles, the culture is going to change.
I suppose so. I guess I have the same basic discomfort you do of touching in the workplace at all.
Right.
So, and I don't think it's because I'm a woman. I think it's because I want there to be really firm boundaries at work.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
anyway, let's get back to it. Okay.
All right.
Babies. You you put Cheerios on your kids' heads apparently.
Yes.
And you snuggled them a bunch.
Yes.
Did you do skin to skin contact?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, I would rub them on the sofa so that to build up a lot of static electricity. And then
stick them to the wall?
I would stick them to my chest. And I have a lot of chest hair, so it would just stick.
Gross. Okay. I happen to remember seeing pictures of your firstborn on your chest when she was first born.
Yes.
We know from science and the reference section, of course, in APA style, touch is helpful. We do skin-to-skin contact with babies. That's common practice nowadays.
Totally.
And just in case you haven't heard of that, what it means is newborn baby, like fresh out of the mom after she's washed up and everything.
Or dad.
Right?
Don't be sexist.
I can't tell if you were making a joke or you're a dumb.
Let's assume the former, please.
So you hold the baby on your chest, baby without the swaddle on, just baby in a diaper.
Well,
right
and they try to do that as soon as possible after the baby launches out of the mom's vagina.
Yes, or C-section scar.
Right.
Yes, don't be sexist or out of the C-section scar. Right, after being washed up and stuff. So, or
are we gonna somehow edit all of that down, or should we do it again?
Yeah, no, I'll edit some of that down.
All right.
Okay, so this is pretty common these days, and it's surely helpful for newborns, but it's especially helpful for low birth weight neonates. That means like
Really?
freshly born baby. Yeah, it seems to help with pain reduction when they're getting vaccinations. So like they actually seem to show less stress from their vaccinations if they have skin to skin contact during it. It also can help with those low birth weight babies have better respiration.
So like they're calm in what way? Like better in what way?
To have more oxygenation.
Oh,
so my firstborn was a preemie, and we didn't get to do any of that really. For the first couple of weeks, I barely got to touch him at all because he was in an isolette. Hardest 2 weeks of my life so far.
Right.
And now reading this research, I'm like, oh, they should have let me hold the baby more. Yeah, he had a lot of trouble breathing, and so they immediately had him on respirators and everything, but all inside the isolette.
Interesting. So it's an isolette, like that thing from Monty Python that says "isolate the baby."
Yes, exactly.
Is it like a case, a tank?
It is exactly. It looks like an aquarium, basically.
Is it like that thing from Empire Strikes Back where Luke Skywalker was put into after he came back from the snow?
Yes, except less water.
Except less water. Okay.
Yeah. I have lots of stories. I'll show lots of pictures to you next time you're over.
That'd be great. I'd love to see it.
Sure. So for grown-ups,
especially if it helps you relive the most awful 2 weeks in your life. Jeez. What a bonus. Okay.
Yeah, it was a rough time, but I'm able to look back now on some of the fun moments, like the time he had a blowout diaper explosion, and it was so disgusting that they had to actually change the isolette. There was like
wow.
No. Yep. That's a fun story that we like to tell around the table.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. In adults, hugs can reduce anxiety. So that kind of makes sense for, some of the stuff you were talking about before. Yeah. It does reduce blood pressure even, and can reduce some symptoms of illness. So there's one study I cite that shows folks who have some somewhat serious-ish illnesses like bronchitis, where there's just this really long-term cough that follows, that those kinds of illnesses, frequent hugs seem to lessen some of those symptoms.
Okay, I have a question about that.
Go for it.
So first of all, the first two things that you said are just like, duh, of course they make people, unless you don't want hugs, right? But
yeah, this assumes consent.
And then the last one that you said was about bronchitis. Could it be an effect where, when you have a cough like that, the muscles are all strained? And that's one of the things that kind of keeps a vicious cycle of coughing going, I think. So like when you're hugging, you're actually putting compression on your chest.
Joey, are you suggesting that the actual like physical like squeezing is like loosening up the phlegm?
Yes,
and, like,
loosening up the phlegm and also like relieving the stress on the muscles.
It's possible. This is one study. Frankly, I read it and I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. I want to see the replication.
What was the end? What was the population of the study?
I don't remember.
Was it like 2 people?
No. It was
mice?
Decent. I'll send it to you. It was not mice people. Okay. So let's go back to the hypothetical before of like being touched at work. Okay. Now, how about a superior touching your back?
Okay.
Like a male superior touching your back versus a female superior touching your back.
No, I don't like anybody just coming over and touching my back while I'm working.
Male
or female. No, I don't like that at all. I like the only kind of touching that I like at work, and coworkers, please listen to this. I suppose unless we're out at a happy hour and getting drunk, that's totally different.
What about wet willies?
Not okay.
Okay. Wedgies?
Not okay.
Because a wedgie, they're not actually touching you.
True. Good point. We have taught our daughters, however, that if they are in school and somebody snaps their bra from behind them, that it is perfectly fine for them to either elbow that person in the face or punch them in the throat.
Awesome.
And that when they get suspended, we will take them out for an ice cream party.
I love it. I'm leaving that.
So even though it is not touching, it's still invading space. But anyway, so yeah, no, I don't. I only like the kind of touching that I can see about to happen, like a fist bump getting primed for a fist bump, or a high five getting primed for a high five. I like that. I don't like surprise touching.
So if the wet willy is coming slowly,
right? Like when you give me a wet willy, like pretty much every chance you get, because that's the only power you hold over me. I'm fine with that because I can set up my defenses.
Okay. So here's the thing is that first of all, I'm hearing just the ickiness of having people touch you. But let's go back to the issue of consent. So the idea of, in work, maybe if people are okay with it, like you said, without permission. But I argue that there's no such thing as asking for permission for touching a subordinate person at work. Because let's say your boss comes up to you and they're like, is it okay to give you a hug? You're not actually asking their permission. It's very difficult to acknowledge consent.
Right. There's a power differential. Because if you said no to that, you might be doing some sort of career limiting move, even if it's not completely overt. The boss would think to him or herself, this person's a cold fish. I don't like working with this person, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. And so therefore, I really like the idea of just the blanket, no touching at all. Just don't even do it.
So how do you enact that? I mean, you're a leader at your office in your chicken coop that you work in with the razor wire and stuff. So how do you implement a no touching policy?
Well, it's really difficult because it still happens, and I'm sure I do it myself. And this is one of the things I wanted to get back to is as women moving up, and I'm a prime example of that. I'm someone who I probably touch a lot without even realizing it. And
are you a prime example of women moving up?
Bad girl. I'm a nasty woman who at times might touch someone by accident on the arm. So the kind of touches I'm thinking of is I don't hug.
You are a nasty woman and you give wet willies.
So I definitely don't hug at work unless I can't even think of a reason. I mean, since I've been promoted, I don't hug at work. The kind of touching I might have done is, let's say there's someone in the hallway and I need to get by them and I'm like, excuse me, and they don't hear me. Right. Then I might tap on the shoulder. What I've been trying to do.
Chop them on the neck or something.
Yeah, chop them on the neck. Throat punch. I've been trying to do lately is just be louder and just be, oh, excuse me, coming through, and just be a little sweet about it rather than touch people, because even then I don't want to be using touch, but I'm sure I still do it. And especially people who I've known for years and years and years. And so that's what I'm really going to be focusing on this challenge.
No, that's interesting. So do you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's my thing. So
you're not.
No, I'm not really. So do you not touch because of, the uncomfortableness that it puts into the other person, or because there's the potential for HR violation and a he says, she says kind of argument going back and forth, even if you thought the touch was okay?
the discomfort, because there's nothing in policies that we have, at least, that preclude touching to like get someone out of the way,
Right.
unless it's inherently sexual. And I'm certainly not doing any of that by any means.
Right.
Someone could argue potentially this person was trying to get by me in the hallway and they touched me on the shoulder to get me to move.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a pretty far stretch. So I'm just referring to discomfort. Plus, also, I think sometimes when you're dealing with shades of gray, it's better to make
use a different phrase.
Wait, oh Lord. Thanks a lot, whoever wrote that book. Now we can never use that phrase
Right,
again.
exactly.
When you're dealing with blurry areas, that is that okay?
No, that doesn't make any sense.
Lines,
yeah, that. Yeah. How about the vagaries of human interaction?
Then I think it's better to make a really strict boundary. So perceptions of touch differ really greatly. Touch from women, people tend to see that as caring, and touch from men, people tend to see that as either a sign of dominance or sexual interest. But women's flirtation is oftentimes touching arms. So a very common flirtation behavior seen in the human female is just a light touch on an arm of a potential mate. And it's a common courting ritual. And so therefore, women, we need to be careful, because if you are touching someone's arm to move past them in a hallway, that could be misconstrued potentially.
Now, wait, hold on. So you're saying that in the human female, that the human female perceives touching a person on the arm as being part of the courting ritual, or are you saying the person that they're touching perceives it that way?
Either and both. I'm just saying that it is part of a flirtation behavior. So the main point being, it can be misconstrued and misperceived and can make people uncomfortable. But I think men need to be especially careful of it in general, because it is seen as dominance or sexual stuff. But a sexual interest. but as women are getting raised up in the workplace, then I think it'll also be seen as dominance there too. So this is really important for people in the role of a medical caregiver. A lot of the research I looked at male versus female nurses and doctors. But it's also really important for supervisors at work or people who work with children. Really any situation in which you have like inherent power over others, even with good intentions, that touch can cause distress and lawsuits, like you said. So bottom line, you can't assume anything. You can't assume, this person has known me for years. It's no big deal. Response to touch varies by gender, social hierarchy, also culture and national origin. I mean, there are some countries where people get right up on each other, or where men are holding hands walking down the road, and that's totally normal. Right. And other cultures, like especially Western cultures, where no, you do not touch at all. Right. But also age. Age has a big factor here too. So you cannot assume anything. And again, as our culture is changing in the United States, I think it's going to be even more important in the workplace that we do have strict boundaries. So that leads us to what we're going to be doing. And like I said, I tend to touch a lot, my friends especially. And at work, I've been trying really hard over the past few years not to do this, but I'm going to work on it even more. But also as a Girl Scout leader, and I do other volunteer work with kids. And so in those situations, I often find myself touching. Like, for example, if I'm trying to get people's attention, or just the other day, I was leading the song Little Bunny Foo-Foo.
Oh, good one. Yes. Yeah. And
when I get to the part about scooping up them field mice and bopping them on the head, I always bop the kids on the head. And I go around, and when I do, now give the good fairy, I do I'm doing it right now to my microphone, do little like finger things on their heads. And I go around and do this to different kids, and they like it, I think. Or maybe their smiles and laughter come from discomfort. I don't know. But I'm inherently in a position of power there. And it's possible that even if it's 1 in 50 kids doesn't want to be bopped on the head during Little Bunny Foo-Foo, I don't know, am I making it a bad experience for my little Girl Scouts?
So for me, I'm going to not touch at work. And when I told my kids about how I'm not going to be touching anybody for the podcast, my 8-year-old started saying, no, you can't do that. I would just die. You can't do it. So I'm going to be not doing the podcast at the field work at home.
Well,
But I'm going to try to see if I can negotiate in maybe like a 48-hour period to do it, just to see what it's like from my perspective and their perspective.
Okay, so I know you just said 48, like the number, but in my mind, I heard you say 4D8, like when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
God.
You have an 8-sided dice and you have to roll it 4 times.
You're such a geek. I'm so glad I never played Dungeons and Dragons.
You did too.
+1 pole arm, baby.
Do you fist bump everybody?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yep.
That's weird.
Yep. Why? No, I mean, I just don't go walk up to people and say, hey, give me a fist bump. I mean, there's usually some kind of...
How you doing? Fist bump.
What is that from?
Yeah, my mouth. I just made it up right now.
Oh, God. So there's, there's usually some kind of like happy trigger for me. That makes me want to do it. So like I'm probably going to have to walk around with my hands in my pockets.
But, I think that's interesting. The fist bump for you sounds like a way of celebration.
That's exactly true. What else would it be?
Yeah, a greeting, I guess, or like an acknowledgement of other humans. Hail and well met.
Oh, God. You are such a nerd.
Okay, let's take a 15-second break so our listeners can listen to Pleasure Kills, and you and I will stop touching people for a couple weeks. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Bye.
I like him giving me a good night, and I like hugging him when he gets home from work because I haven't seen him all day.
Hi, 12-year-old. Over the last 48 hours, we've not been doing any touching. How's it gone?
Well, sometimes he did it purposefully to annoy me. Like, he'd reach up for a high five and I'd go like that, and he'd pull it away and smile at my annoyance, and then I'd throw a chip at him.
Yeah, I think that happened once or twice, right?
Thrice.
There were a couple times when, like, we were almost going to give each other a hug or a kiss or something, and then we're like, oh, wait a second. Well, I'm glad it's over, because it's been bugging me. Can I give you a hug goodnight?
Sure. Oh, boy. Night.
What do you think about me not touching people for a couple of weeks?
I don't care. What? I don't. It's a true factor.
Well, would you want me to stop nuzzling you for a couple of weeks?
Yes.
Hey!
How's it going?
Pretty good.
I'd like to make this half of the episode for my dad.
Oh, okay. Why's that?
Because he fell down and broke a rib.
Yeah, that stinks. Poor guy. But
Poor
now,
guy.
when you say my dad,
Yeah.
does that mean he's not my dad?
Well, he's more mine than I've had him as a dad for longer than you have by 7 years.
Okay, fair. Hopefully by the time this episode deploys, here's what we'll do. I will take a really long time to edit. So by the time this deploys, hopefully he'll be all better.
All right, that sounds really terrible. I don't like that idea at all, actually.
Okay, we'll get it out there very soon so he has
Right.
something to listen to in recovery.
Yes.
Dad, we hope you feel better soon. We love you. We should also give a big shout out to the Seattle After Party podcast.
Oh,
we
yes,
had a really
Seattle
good time.
After Party.
Our first live show, which I was a little worried about performing live with you, Mark, because I thought the stink would make
Be
me
so
start retching.
overpowering. Yeah.
So everybody listen to the Seattle After Party podcast in general, but especially the most recent episode that had us on it. It was pretty fun.
With Daryl.
Daryl.
I've heard it both ways.
All right. So.
No, actually, I haven't heard his name both ways. I think he pronounces it Daryl.
Anyway, touching.
What? Back to us.
Back to yeah, enough of thinking about others. How did it go for
That's
you?
right. I didn't like it one bit.
Really? Why?
It was like I had parts of my personality that could still get out of my space, but
Right.
most of the time I walked around with my hands in my pockets.
Oh, just to like avoid yourself from inadvertently doing it?
Yeah,
like by
exactly
accident?
right. I just couldn't really, without doing that, I couldn't really control myself. And I found that my hands were flying up for high fives or fist bumps at work all the time.
Wait, so you're just going around touching other humans all the time?
Yeah, totally right.
Wow.
Totally
Do
right.
you think if it was... the first week on the job when you're an FNG, you wouldn't do that. But let's say
Wait, whoa, what does that mean? Break it
a
down.
fun new guy.
Oh, God. Well, thank you, Julie. You're assuming a lot about me, so that's really nice of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally totally what that stands for. If you were like much lower on the totem pole, going back to our science section last time, would you be walking around touching people, do you think?
Even though I mean, like I totally just high five and fist bump whoever I just had some positive experience with. Or
what about your boss?
Yeah,
or
totally.
Supervisor?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I take it back.
Yep. In fact,
you are not a hypocritical oath.
No, well, my manager and I, in fact,
with an F.
With an F.
Sorry.
We had some success on a project after I got done with the field work for this episode, and yeah, totally gave a fist bump. And
okay.
Like, it depends on the person. I mean, there's some people who I don't know if they are into high fives, fist bumps, elbow bumps, head nods, whatever. I don't know. But for him, it's all good.
Oh, so it's kind of like the sarcasm episode where you had to realize some people around you may not actually be into this.
Well, yeah, and I think I talked about that in the first half. It's so long ago now. But yeah, me too.
I kind of tune you out.
That's super nice.
Yeah.
I did try it out at home.
For a couple days?
Yeah, so you heard the kickoff of it during the interview, but basically it was 48 hours with not touching my 12-year-old, and at the end of that 48-hour time frame, Kendra said that she wanted to keep it going all the way until Sunday.
What? wait. Why?
Because she thought it wouldn't be a really good test, and I wouldn't really get to experience what it's like to not have that kind of contact if we just did it for 48 hours. That was ostensibly her reason, and I'm going to stick with it.
Okay, fair enough.
Right. I'm sure there could be other reasons there that we could unpack, but I don't know what they are.
Julie here breaking in. Just to clarify, Kendra wanted Marc to continue doing the field work because she wanted him to continue not touching her. It had nothing to do with their daughter. I totally get it, Kendra. What about just strangers, like outside of work, like not in the work setting, not in the home setting, just random people?
I had to keep doing the socially acceptable thing of shaking hands at functions that I would go to, because there were a couple that I went to. I couldn't honestly do it and still like maintain any kind of facade of being a human being, I think.
Yeah,
that's what was going through my head.
Awkward. Like if someone reaches out to shake your hand and you're like, not doing that.
Right. There was so much pressure that I couldn't do it. Hold on a second. Yeah. What's up? This is my 12-year-old.
I know my mama wanted to do it until Sunday. It's because you smell.
Which is amazing considering your Aunt Julie said pretty much the same exact thing.
I'm single.
So I loved this. This was
really?
So awesome. Yeah, at
really?
work, there was no difference whatsoever. I have been, like I said last time, I've been trying really hard not to touch people anyway, and I still just continued not touching people. So that was fine, and no one touched me. That I remember at least.
Well,
so
but did people touch you? Do people usually touch you?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So at work...
So there was no difference there.
Okay.
But people do usually touch me out and about in the world, and that continued happening. And this is the consistent thing that happens in all of our podcasts. When we give something up, we start notice everyone else doing the thing that we're giving up because it's so salient.
Right.
And so I was just hyper aware of like everywhere I go, people touching me. While they talked to me, touching my arms, I went on a plane. So in the airport, of course, everyone's moving against you. And it just really struck me.
The difference between moving against you and reaching out and touching you is different.
Oh, totally, hugely different. Yeah, but it did strike me that some occupations, just random people are touching you all the time, and you have to be really gracious about it. Like the flight attendants. For me, just moving down the aisle with my suitcase, I like having to rub against people to go to the restroom in the airplane and things. And to be a flight attendant, that must happen to you constantly. And it just must be one of those things where you just have to disassociate it a little bit and think, okay, this isn't my body that's being rubbed up against.
Well, no, okay, but hold on a second. I just got to stop you because this episode is all about proactively touching people. What you're describing is not the same thing at all.
I agree. But
out of bounds and out of scope.
Regardless, my insights were phenomenal and deserve airtime. So anyway.
And what if a person likes rubbing against other people on the airplane?
Well,
I'm not saying I do, but I have a friend.
Disorder.
Keep going, Julie.
Anyway,
Keep going with your out of scope discussion.
Okay, so here's one little trick to keep people from shaking your hands that I learned. Have a carpal tunnel flare up and wear carpal tunnel gloves around. So for one week of this, I was wearing my carpal tunnel gloves. People would reach out to shake my hand and be like, oh, well, I'll just wave instead. So it was a really nice, gracious way of getting out of handshaking. So anyone out there with germ phobias, get some carpal tunnel or just the gloves. But
Sam, we're talking to you.
Yeah. So you remember how we talked last time about people using touch in a really aggressive, assertive way? So that happened to me at one point. Ooh. I was on an airplane and someone, we were talking about, oh, what do you do? That whole conversation. And I said, I am a psychologist for the military. And the woman next to me asked me if I do waterboarding.
What?
And yes. And
oh my God, what an idiot.
Yep. And if I was involved in the torture in Iraq and Afghanistan, she did not use as nice words as I'm using right now. She was really rude and quite angry. And then she reached over and said, what are you going to do under Trump? And then she grabbed my arms gently, but still putting both her hands on my arm. I'm next to her in the airplane and looked me in the eye and said, if they tell you to do waterboarding, you quit your job. It is not worth it. Do the right thing.
Oh my gosh.
So at that point, I said, I think you might want to familiarize yourself with what a psychologist does. And then the man on the other side of her very kindly was like, I think this woman actually probably helps people with PTSD and head injury.
Right.
And I was like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, I know what psychology is. So anyway, that point I put on my headphones, which also stopped the talking. But it was very interesting how she used, and the touching, how she used the touching as part of her emphasizing her point.
Oh, sure.
So the other thing.
Wow, Julie, that's awful. So how long was the flight and how long did you have to sit next to her?
5 hours.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Could have been worse.
Yeah.
Could have been 6 hours. And the person on the other side of her kept sending me like these empathic, emotional looks throughout the flight, which is very sweet. Okay, so the hardest thing for me was children. So children are weird. We all know
they're little
this.
Bastards.
Hey, that's not nice.
You're right. I'm just joking around. But so at one point, I
Can she hear what I'm saying?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
She can only hear what I'm saying.
All right.
So at one point, I needed to walk past a child who was standing in a doorway. And this is like early on in the experiment, so I'm very vigilant. And I was like, excuse me. I didn't want to just like bodily move this child out of the way. And I couldn't get past him. And he was little, like 3. So he just stood there. And so finally his mom heard me saying, excuse me. And I'm sure she was like, dude, why didn't you just tap him on the shoulder or move past him?
Right.
Yes. Why is what so hot?
This interlude is brought to you by Procreation.
Okay. So, so kids. Oh, okay. So I think I've mentioned that I am an assistant troop leader for a Daisy Girl Scout troop. And that was...
You have mentioned that over and over again.
It's really fun. But darn if those kids don't want to hug all the time. And it's really hard because, like, here's another situation where I'm thinking, okay, I'm the adult here. I cannot initiate the hug. But if they come up and hug me, I'm not going to turn them away. I'm patting their back. So at one point, we were doing this thankfulness thing the other day and made thank you notes to people. And one of the girls wrote me a thank you note, and it was really sweet. It said, I love you, Julie.
Aww.
She handed it to me, and I reached out my hand to shake her hand afterwards. It's like, what do I do here, right?
How old are these kids?
5 and 6 and 7.
So what happened?
She looked at me. She had no idea. And then I just hugged her. And, it was, or I think I said, can I give you a hug? But like, even just saying, can I give you a hug when you're the person in the higher power position, it's not a real ask, right? But still, I think, like you said, there was no social way to get out of that. And I didn't want to be rejecting of this poor child.
That is great. So I know with your own kids, though, I mean, you have train people who are around your kids to ask your kids if they can be given a hug.
Right, exactly. We work on that a lot, and my kids know, like with tickling or with hugging and things, that you've got to ask permission. And if someone says stop or no, you stop immediately. Anything else is a timeoutable offense.
No, I mean, that's good because your kids need to learn the rules, or it's a box of shame for them. But what I mean is
the adults
around them.
Yeah, we work on it, but I'm sure it still happens. And I've been having the safety discussions with my older child.
Right.
And we are talking about why we in our family choose not to do sleepover parties until we're old enough. And I think at this point he's old enough to do sleepovers at other people's houses. But we were talking about how younger kids, if an adult said to my 6-year-old, hey, come here and sit on my lap, it's hard for a 6-year-old to know how to say, no, thank you. We train kids, on the one hand, obey adults. And on the other hand, I'm trying to train them that your body's your own body and you get to say what happens.
Yes.
So it's tricky, but I think it's important to have these discussions. I don't think it's protecting them against everything, but I also don't want to ruin their worldview of having them think they live in a horrible, dangerous, awful place.
Yeah, right. Totally. Julie.
Mark.
Or let me finish telling you about the experience at home.
Okay.
So remember, So
you smelled really bad.
No, that wasn't it. That was just stuff that you made up.
I think it's been verified.
By my 12-year-old.
By your 12-year-old.
So Kendra thought it would be very important, and I agreed with her to try it out at home. But I want everybody to know that I did not do an experiment that my kids weren't into. So my 8-year-old wasn't part of this at all. Nothing changed between me and her.
She wanted nothing to do with this. She wanted to continue getting smelly hugs.
My 12-year-old was into it, and Kendra was into it. So it was really hard for me to wake up in the morning, and usually my 12-year-old is downstairs eating breakfast, and I go up to her and kiss her on the head and give her a hug, whatever, and I couldn't do that. And then also just when I'm leaving and seeing Kendra in the morning, we, hug or kiss or whatever. And then when I know, and then when I leave for work, we usually hug or kiss. And it was so strange because we just kind of stood there looking at each other.
Right.
We still had all of the behaviors leading up to that final kiss goodbye without the final kiss goodbye. And so we kind of just stood there going, and waved at each other.
That's weird. Yeah.
It was really weird and awkward. It was so strange.
Because it was a different pattern. I mean, if your normal pattern was you did the hand jive, then not doing that would feel weird.
But yeah, I would not recommend this. If your pattern, Julie, is all about touching and hugging and all this kind of stuff, keep at it. It's just awesome.
I think if you are potentially one of the people out there who is in a power dynamic at work or in other situations, and you describe yourself as, well, I'm just a hugger, everyone around me just has to kind of live with that because that's who I am, then I would say definitely try this just to be more cognizant of how often you're touching and who you're touching. If you find that the people that you're touching are only your subordinates at work or only people who you have a power dynamic difference with, then I think you might want to build some insight about that and see if those around you are truly touching you through their own will.
So giving this experiment a try.
Yes. That was a much pithier way of saying
No,
it.
I think what you said was really well said, and I agree with you.
Okay.
But I'm not going to change the way I do things.
Okay.
Except I guess I will at work be a little bit more cognizant of the people I'm with. And I'm not just going to assume everybody likes a nice fist bump.
Yeah. I'm going to...
What are you going to?
I'm going to continue to be aware of people touching me. But I think I might consider, if I'm in a bad mood and someone touches me and I don't want to be touched, saying, please don't touch me. And be a little bit more assertive about that. A couple times during this experiment when people, like one time I was in Starbucks and the man next to me was like, oh, are you ready to order? And while he said that, he put his hand on my shoulder. And it was just a completely unnecessary touch. It's not like I had any question of who he was addressing and I needed to have that hand there. And I was going to try to interview him, but he left. Anyway, in that moment, I think if I'd been really hungry and grouchy, I might have said, please don't touch me. But then that's so rejecting and off-putting to people who like I said before, consider themselves in the camp of, I'm just a hugger.
Or they're not even thinking about it.
Right. They're just
Which
not
is
aware.
what this podcast is all about.
Right. So I don't know
Becoming mindful.
Being mindful. Hashtag mindfulness. But I don't know whether it is a jerky move to say to people, please don't touch me, or I don't like to be touched, in order to raise everyone else's awareness, just because
Julie,
I'm into not being touched.
it's not a jerky move, but it will be perceived as a jerky move.
Yeah.
Right?
It would be, especially if it's someone who I'm never going to interact with again. I mean, maybe I'm helping out every other person that he interacts with, but he might just think, she's a jerk.
And he might double down.
I'm ready for a fist fight in Starbucks. I could take him.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's somebody who I do have to interact with often. Like if I have a new coworker and the FNG starts touching me when they talk to me, then I will try to be assertive about that.
Yeah, I think workplace is a great place to be assertive about that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, good job, Julie. Let me know how your new assertiveness goes.
Yeah, I hope we get some FNGs that I can I can tell off.
Right.
Sounds great.
Very good. Especially if they're like a general or something. Well, Julie, thank you for doing this experiment.
Yay!
I'm glad you stuck with it for once. What are we going to be doing next time? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I've already started trying to wean off our next one.
Me too.
So that I don't go insane and have headaches, because folks, we're going to give up our true love. My true love, caffeine.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Did you forget what we were doing?
No, I just thought your true love was letting your dog lick you in the mouth. I wasn't off base on that, was I?
Not my dog.
Okay.
Other dogs, maybe.
Okay.
Thank you to our family. Thanks, you to our awesome listeners.
Yay.
Hey, folks, if you get a chance, share one of our posts on Facebook with your friends and say, hey, y'all, you should be listening to this podcast. We'd really appreciate that. You can go to wagonpod.com, too, where you can listen, view our show notes, and subscribe to the podcast. Marc can say some stuff, too.
I'm trying to find it.
Oh, okay. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter at WagonPod. Mm-hmm. And if you have suggestions, we are wagonpodcast@gmail.com. We also take critiques of Marc.
We don't take those critiques, no.
You can tweet them at me. And thank you to the Pleasure Kills for the use of the song Modern Problems. There is nothing else to say. This is the end of the podcast. This is where we go away. I've been Dr. Julie Ken.
And I've been her brother.
We're getting equal pay, and yay, we're burning our bras. And
my God, do you want to just start that sentence over?